The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Catherine Brennan stumbled through the Arizona territory, her worn boots kicking up clouds of red dust. 3 days without food, 2 without water. The silver locket around her neck, her mother's last gift, felt heavier with each step. She'd left Santa Fe with nothing but the clothes on her back and that locket, fleeing the man her father had sold her to for a cattle ranch and $200. Her vision blurred. The saguaro cacti wavered like ghosts. She fell to her knees, fingers fumbling with the locket's clasp. If she could just reach the trading post she'd spotted on the horizon, maybe someone would trade food for this last precious thing. Catherine whispered a prayer her mother had taught her, then pressed forward. Before we continue with Catherine's desperate journey, I want to ask you something important. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. Your support truly matters to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. Thank you so much. Now, let's get back to Catherine's story. She never made it to the trading post. The Apache warrior appeared as if materialized from the desert itself, silent, lethal, magnificent. Catherine froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd heard the stories, the warnings, the terror in people's voices when they spoke of the savages who ruled these lands. He stood 6 feet of pure muscle and controlled power, his copper skin gleaming with sweat, long black hair tied back with leather cord. War paint marked his high cheekbones. A rifle rested easy in his hands, but his dark eyes, intelligent, assessing, fixed on her with an intensity that stole what little breath she had left. "Please," Catherine whispered, holding out the locket with trembling fingers. "I have this. Silver. It's worth something. I just need water, food, anything." He moved closer, his moccasins making no sound on the hard-packed earth. His gaze traveled from the locket to her sunburned face, to her torn dress, to the bruises on her wrists, evidence of her escape from Randall Coltrane, the man who'd thought he'd bought himself a wife. The warrior spoke, his English surprisingly clear, though accented with something that made each word sound like a song. "Gold and silver mean nothing in the desert, white woman. They cannot fill your belly or cool your blood." Catherine swayed, the world tilting. Then I have nothing to offer." He caught her before she hit the ground, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone who carried death in his eyes. "You offer yourself," he said quietly, and when her eyes widened in fear, he shook his head. "Not like that. You are dying. I will not let you die on Chiricahua land." She should have been terrified. Everything she'd been taught said she should be. But something in his voice, in the careful way he supported her weight, spoke of honor, deeper than any she'd known in the so-called civilized world. "Why?" she managed to ask. His jaw tightened. "Because I know what it is to run, to have nothing, to be hunted." He lifted her effortlessly, cradling her against his chest. "My name is Dakota. It means friend to everyone. My people do not always agree with this name." Catherine's head fell against his shoulder as consciousness slipped away. The last thing she heard was his voice, low and certain. "You are safe now. I give you my word." She woke to the smell of sage and mesquite smoke. Catherine's eyes fluttered open to find herself in a small dwelling, half cave, half shelter, built into the side of a red rock canyon. A fire crackled nearby, and the scent of roasting meat made her stomach clench with desperate hunger. Dakota knelt beside her, holding a water skin. "Slowly," he instructed, supporting her head. Too much too fast will make you sick. The water was the most beautiful thing she'd ever tasted. When she'd had enough, he offered her small pieces of cooked rabbit, watching carefully as she ate. His attentiveness felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. Randall had never looked at her like this, like she mattered, like her well-being was important. "Why do you live alone?" Catherine asked, her voice stronger now. "I thought Apache lived in camps." Something flickered across his face, pain, old and deep. "They do. I chose differently." He stirred the fire, shadows dancing across the strong planes of his face. "My wife died 2 winters ago. My daughter with her. Sickness that the white man's medicine could not cure. I told our chief I would never take another woman, never allow myself such weakness again." "They told me love was a weakness," Catherine whispered, recognizing the defensive walls in his words. She'd built the same ones herself. Dakota's eyes snapped to hers, surprised. "Your people told you this?" "Not in those words. But my father sold me like cattle. My mother died of a broken heart. Love seemed dangerous." She looked down at her hands. "The man I was running from said love was for fools, that a wife was property, a tool for making heirs and keeping house." "You are not property," Dakota said, his voice hard as flint. "You are a person, with breath and blood and a spirit that fights to survive." He stood, moving to a corner where supplies were neatly arranged. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, I teach you to survive. If you stay, you work, you learn. You become strong. And if I want to leave?" He met her gaze steadily. "Then I take you to the nearest town and you walk away. I keep no slaves, Catherine Brennan." He paused. "Yes, you spoke your name in your fever. I am not a jailer. But out there," he gestured to the vast desert beyond the shelter, "you will die alone. Or worse, that man you ran from will find you." Catherine thought of Randall's meaty hands, his whiskey breath, the way he'd grabbed her wrist so hard it had bruised in the shape of his fingers. She thought of her father counting money while signing her life away. "I'll stay," she said. "I'll learn." Dakota nodded once, approval flickering in his dark eyes. "Good. Sleep now, little rabbit who thinks herself weak. Tomorrow, you discover you are stronger than you know." The days fell into a rhythm that transformed her body and quieted some of the screaming in her mind. Dakota was a patient but demanding teacher. He taught her to track rabbits and quail by reading the desert's subtle signs. A displaced pebble, a bent blade of grass, the direction of bird flight. He showed her which plants held water in their roots, which could heal wounds, which would kill if eaten. His hands guided hers as she learned to string a bow, his breath warm against her ear as he corrected her stance. "Your feet," he murmured one afternoon, adjusting her position with a touch to her hip that sent unexpected heat through her body. "Plant them like roots. The earth must know you belong here." Catherine released the arrow. It flew true, striking the target he'd made from woven grass. Pride surged through her chest. "Again," Dakota said, but she heard the smile in his voice. By the second week, her sunburn had faded to a golden tan. Her hands, once soft and useless, developed calluses. She could start a fire with flint and dried grass, could skin and cook game without flinching, could read the sky for coming storms. But it was the nights that undid her careful defenses. After the work was done, they would sit by the fire, and Dakota would speak of his people, not the stories white settlers told, but the truth. The beauty of "Teach me," Catherine asked one night, the stars brilliant and countless overhead. "Teach me your language." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, then something warmer. Shaddai, he said softly. What does it mean? My friend, he held her gaze. But more than friend. It means one whose voice I listen for, one whose absence I notice. Catherine's heart stuttered. Dakota, your turn, he said, deflecting. Tell me something of your world, something true. So she told him about her mother, who had loved wildflowers and had tried to teach Catherine that gentleness was not weakness. About the books she'd read in secret, the dreams she'd had of traveling, of choosing her own path. About the morning she'd woken to find her father and Randall shaking hands over her future. I waited until the night before the wedding, Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. I took nothing but this locket and I ran. I didn't even know where I was running to. I just ran. Dakota's hand found hers in the darkness between them. His palm was warm, calloused, strong. You ran toward yourself, he said quietly. Toward the woman you were meant to be. Their fingers intertwined, neither pulling away. Catherine felt something crack open inside her chest. Something that had been frozen since the day her father had stopped seeing her as a daughter and started seeing her as a transaction. I'm afraid, she admitted, of how I feel when you look at me, when you touch me. Everything I was taught says I should fear you, but instead She couldn't finish. I know. His thumb traced circles on her wrist over the fading bruises. They told me love was a weakness. He repeated her words from that first night, his voice rough with emotion. My elders, after my wife died, they said a warrior cannot afford such softness. That to love is to give your enemy a weapon against you. Do you believe that? Dakota turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. I did. For 2 years, I believed it. I built walls of stone around my heart. I told myself I would live alone, die alone, need no one. What changed? Catherine breathed, though she knew the answer. Then she smiled. His thumb brushed over her lips, gentle as a prayer. And I dropped my weapon. The kiss was inevitable as sunrise. Tender at first, testing, tasting. Catherine's hands fisted in his buckskin shirt, pulling him closer. Dakota made a sound low in his throat, his control fraying as he deepened the kiss, his hands sliding into her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. We should go slow, Catherine whispered, though everything in her body screamed otherwise. Yes, Dakota agreed, but neither of them moved. I'm not ready for everything. Not yet. It hurts. She touched her chest. Here, the memories, the fear. His eyes softened with understanding that broke her heart. I will die before I hurt you, Catherine. We move at your speed, only yours. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, achingly sweet. I have been alone for 2 years. I can be patient for someone worth waiting for. You think I'm worth it? I see a woman worth saving, he said simply. But more, a woman who saved herself, who chose to live when dying would have been easier. That kind of strength, he shook his head in wonder. That is the strength of mountains, of the desert that survives when everything else perishes. Catherine slept that night, with her head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. His arms a sanctuary she'd never known existed. 3 weeks after Catherine had stumbled into his life, Dakota woke her before dawn. Get dressed, he said, urgent but not panicked. Someone comes. Her blood went cold. Randall? I don't know. 3 riders. They're tracking, asking questions in the settlements. He handed her a knife, the blade sharp and deadly. If I tell you to run, you run. Do not argue. Do not look back. I won't leave you. His eyes flashed. Catherine. No. She stood her ground, the knife steady in her hand. His training had made her certain. You said I wasn't property. That means you don't get to order me around for my own good. We face this together. For a moment, she thought he might argue. Then something like pride crossed his face. Together, he agreed, his hand finding hers briefly before they heard the horses approaching. Randall Coltrane looked exactly as Catherine remembered. Thick-bodied, red-faced, mean eyes that assessed everything in terms of ownership and use. 2 ranch hands flanked him, both armed with rifles. Well, well, Randall drawled, his gaze crawling over Catherine with possessive hunger. Thought you could run from me, did you? Cost me a month of tracking and a fortune in bounty hunters. His eyes shifted to Dakota, lip curling. And you took up with a savage. Your daddy's gonna love hearing that. My father has no claim on me, Catherine said, her voice steadier than she felt. And neither do you. The marriage never happened. See, that's where you're wrong, honey. Randall swung down from his horse. Your daddy took my money. That makes you mine, fair and square. Now you can come along peaceful, or, his hand moved toward his gun, we can do this the hard way. Dakota moved like liquid lightning, stepping between Catherine and the men, his rifle raised. She stays. You leave. Now. Randall laughed, an ugly sound. An Apache giving me orders. That's rich. He looked at his men. Take care of the Indian. Careful with the girl, though. She's valuable. Everything happened at once. The ranch hands raised their rifles. Dakota fired, dropping one man before diving to cover. Catherine threw her knife, Dakota's training guiding her hand, and watched it sink into the second man's shoulder. His rifle clattered uselessly, but Randall was faster than his bulk suggested. He lunged for Catherine, grabbing her arm with bruising force. You little bitch. The shot echoed across the canyon. Randall staggered, blood blooming across his shirt. He looked down in shock, then up at Catherine, who held Dakota's second rifle, smoke curling from the barrel. You shot me, he said, disbelieving. You're not dead, Catherine replied coldly. But if you ever come near me again, you will be. Now get on your horse and go tell my father his daughter isn't for sale anymore. Randall clutched his wounded side, his face contorted with rage and pain. But he saw something in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Strength, certainty, danger. This ain't over, he spat. Yes, Catherine said quietly, it is. She kept the rifle trained on him as he and his wounded men mounted their horses and rode away. Dust trailing behind them like a coward's banner. Only when they disappeared did Catherine start shaking. The rifle slipped from her hands. Dakota caught it, then caught her, pulling her tight against his chest. You were magnificent, he murmured into her hair. I shot a man. You protected yourself, protected us. He pulled back to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. You are a warrior, Catherine. Own it. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate and claiming. Dakota responded with equal intensity, walking her backwards until her back hit the rock wall of their shelter. His mouth moved to her throat, her collarbone, each kiss a brand of ownership that felt nothing like Randall's grabbing hands, and everything like freedom. Wait, Catherine gasped. Wait, He stopped immediately, breathing hard, but his eyes were clear, controlled. Tell me. Not here, not like this. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I want to choose you, properly. Not in fear or adrenaline, but because I choose you. Does that make sense? Dakota's smile was worth more than all the silver in her mother's locket. It makes perfect sense, Shaddai. I am not going anywhere. When you're ready, truly ready, I will be here. Promise? I swear it on my daughter's memory, he said, and she knew he meant it with everything he was. The transformation came slowly, naturally, like the desert blooming after rain. Catherine learned to ride a horse bareback, her body moving in rhythm with the animal's gait, Dakota's hands steadying her waist when she wobbled. She learned to speak basic Chiricahua, her tongue wrapping around the unfamiliar sounds, until Dakota praised her pronunciation with a kiss that left them both breathless. She made her first full buckskin dress, her stitches careful and even. When she put it on, Dakota's eyes darkened with appreciation and something deeper. You look like you belong here, he said quietly. I feel like I belong here, she replied, and realized it was true. One evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of copper and gold, Dakota took her to a high ridge overlooking endless wilderness. The wind carried the smell of sage and possibilities. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice serious. I sent word to my people. About you. About us. Catherine's heart lurched. What did they say? My chief says if I wish to take a wife, that is my choice to make. But he warns that our path will not be easy. Your people will judge you for choosing an Apache. My people will judge me for choosing a white woman. We will walk between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. Is that what you want? Catherine asked, hardly daring to hope. A wife? Dakota turned to her, taking both her hands in his. I want you, Catherine Brennan. I want to wake beside you every morning and fall asleep listening to your breath every night. I want to teach you more of my language and learn more of yours. I want to protect you and be protected by you, because you are strong enough to stand beside me, not behind me. He reached into his shirt and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he drew a ring, simple, beautiful, made of hammered silver with a single turquoise stone. I made this for my first wife, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I have carried it with me like a chain, a reminder of loss, of why I should never love again. But you have taught me that love is not weakness. It is the greatest strength. It is choosing to hope when hope seems foolish, choosing to trust when trust has been broken. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. I cannot give you an easy life, Dakota continued. I cannot give you safety from judgment or hardship. But I can give you my whole heart, my protection, my partnership. I can give you a choice. Every day you can choose to stay with me or choose to leave. You are not property. You are not owned. You are free, and I am asking you to freely choose me. They told me love was a weakness, Catherine whispered through her tears. She touched his face, this fierce warrior who had shown her more tenderness than any civilized man. Then she smiled, and he dropped his weapon. She smiled through her tears. You taught me that love is the strongest weapon of all. Yes, Dakota. Yes, I choose you, today and every day. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if meant for her all along. The kiss they shared tasted like tears and triumph, like endings and beginnings, like two broken people, discovering they could be whole together. They were married by a traveling priest, one of the few willing to perform such a ceremony, with Tekoda's chief and a small group of his people as witnesses. Catherine wore her buckskin dress and wildflowers in her hair. Tekoda wore traditional Apache wedding attire, his face painted with symbols of protection and devotion. The ceremony blended their worlds, Apache traditions of gift exchange and prayer, Christian vows of commitment and faithfulness. When the priest pronounced them married, Tekoda cupped Catherine's face and kissed her with a reverence that made several witnesses look away, embarrassed by such raw emotion. "My wife," he murmured against her lips. "My husband," she replied, and marveled at how right it felt. Their wedding night was tender, patient, perfect. Tekoda made love to her like she was precious, breakable, divine. He worshipped every inch of her skin with his hands and mouth, murmuring words of love in both English and Chiricahua until she forgot every harsh touch she'd ever known and knew only his gentleness. When she cried, not from pain, but from overwhelming emotion, he kissed away every tear and held her until her trembling stopped. "You are mine," he whispered, "and I am yours, together." "Together," Catherine agreed, and pulled him close again. 5 years later, Catherine adjusted the cradleboard on her back, feeling their daughter shift against her. Little Nasha, which meant owl in Chiricahua, for the wise eyes she'd been born with, gurgled contentedly as Catherine worked the garden plot they'd expanded near their home. Their home had grown too. No longer just the small shelter, but a proper dwelling, part Apache wickiup, part frontier cabin, wholly theirs. Other families had joined them, outcasts like them, people who belonged to multiple worlds and chose to make a new one together. Tekoda rode up the canyon path, returning from a hunting trip, their son riding in front of him on the horse. 4-year-old James Tekoda was already showing signs of his father's strength and his mother's stubborn independence. "Mama," he called, waving enthusiastically. "Papa let me track a rabbit." "Did you find it?" Catherine called back, grinning. "No, but I found its house," her son replied proudly. Tekoda dismounted with easy grace, lifting their son down before coming to kiss Catherine thoroughly, his hand gentle on their daughter's tiny head. "Still smile like that?" he murmured against her lips, "and I will always drop my weapon." Catherine laughed, the sound free and bright in the desert air. "Lucky for you, I plan to keep smiling." They walked inside together, their children between them, their future uncertain, but their love absolute. They would face judgment, they would face hardship, but they would face it together. And that made all the difference, because they had learned what their people had tried to teach them differently, that love was not weakness. Love was the courage to hope when hope was foolish, to trust when trust was broken, to build when destruction seemed certain. Love was the greatest strength of all, and they had chosen it freely and completely every single day. The winter of 1872 came hard and fast, bringing with it more than just snow and bitter winds. It brought Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Whitmore and 2 companies of cavalry to the territory, with orders to pacify the remaining Apache populations and relocate them to reservations. Catherine was grinding corn when she heard the horses, too many horses, moving with military precision. Her hand instinctively went to the rifle Tekoda had taught her to keep always within reach. Tekoda emerged from the barn where he'd been repairing saddles, his body tense, reading danger the way other men read books. Their son James ran to his side, and Dakota's hand fell protectively on the boy's shoulder. "Catherine," he said quietly, "take the children inside." No, she moved to stand beside him instead. Little Nasha secure in her cradle board, James pressed between them. "Together, remember?" The corner of his mouth lifted despite the gravity of the moment. Together. Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore was everything Catherine had learned to despise about so-called civilized men. Ramrod straight, eyes cold as January ice, viewing everything through the lens of conquest and control. His gaze swept over their small settlement, lingering on the mixed group of Apache and white families who had made lives here. "This is quite the unusual arrangement," Whitmore said, his voice dripping with disdain. He looked directly at Catherine. "Ma'am, are you being held here against your will? Blink twice if you need rescue." Catherine's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Rescue? I rescued myself years ago, Colonel. These people, my people, are not your concern." "I'm afraid they are." Whitmore pulled out an official-looking document. "By order of the United States government, all Apache must report to the San Carlos Reservation within 30 days. Those who resist will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." Dakota's hand tightened on James's shoulder. Catherine saw the war in his eyes, the ancient warrior instinct to fight, to never surrender, battling against the knowledge of what resistance would cost. Their children, their community, their life together. "We are peaceful here," Dakota said, his English deliberately clear, giving no excuse for misunderstanding. "We hunt, we farm, we harm no one. We have white families living with us. We're not your enemy." "You're Apache," Whitmore replied flatly. "That makes you the government's problem." His eyes flicked to Catherine again, and something ugly moved in them. "And you, ma'am, are a disgrace to your race, living like a squaw, bearing half-breed children." Dakota moved like lightning, his hand on his knife. But Catherine was faster. Stepping between them, her rifle raised and pointed directly at Whitmore's chest. "Finish that sentence," she said, her voice deadly calm, "and you'll discover that this disgrace is an excellent shot. My children are not half-breeds. They are whole persons, loved and wanted. My husband is more of a man than you'll ever be. And if you threaten my family again, Colonel, your men will be carrying you back to Fort Apache in pieces." The clearing fell silent. Whitmore's hand hovered near his sidearm, but he saw something in Catherine's eyes that gave him pause. This was not a frightened woman to be intimidated. This was a mother protecting her cubs, and that made her the most dangerous creature in the territory. "Stand down, soldier," came a voice from behind Whitmore. An older officer rode forward, Captain William Harris, his weathered face showing more wisdom than Whitmore's entire bearing. "Mrs., I'm sorry, I don't know your married name." "Catherine Whitefeather," she replied, using the English translation of Dakota's name that they'd adopted for dealing with authorities. "This is my husband, Dakota Whitefeather, and our children." Harris nodded respectfully. "Ma'am, sir," he turned to Whitmore. "Colonel, might I suggest we take a different approach? These folks aren't hostiles. They're exactly what the government says it wants: peaceful integration, farming, productive citizens." "They're Apache," Whitmore repeated stubbornly. "He's Apache," Harris corrected, gesturing to Dakota. "She's white. The children are American citizens, and from what I can see, they've built something worth preserving here, not destroying." Over the next hour, a tense negotiation unfolded. Captain Harris, it turned out, had a daughter who had married a Lakota man in Montana, and he understood the impossible position families like theirs occupied. Too white for the tribes, too native for white society, belonging nowhere and fighting to belong somewhere. The compromise was painful, but necessary. Dakota would register with the Indian Affairs Office, report quarterly, and accept supervision, which essentially meant proving repeatedly that they weren't a threat. In exchange, they could keep their land, keep their community, keep their life together. But compromises always came with costs. "There's one more condition," Whitmore said, his smile cruel. "Your children must attend the Indian school in Santa Fe. They need to be educated properly, learn to be civilized." Catherine felt Dakota go rigid beside her. They both knew what happened at those schools. Children torn from their families, forbidden to speak their languages, beaten for practicing their cultures, told everything about their heritage was savage and wrong. "No," Dakota said flatly. "Then you refuse the agreement," Whitmore replied, "and will return with more men and remove you by force." James tugged on his father's shirt. "Papa, what's wrong?" Catherine knelt down, her heart breaking. She looked up at Captain Harris, searching his face. "There must be another way." Harris considered, then spoke carefully. What if they were educated here? By qualified teachers? The government's concern is that Native children receive education, not specifically where they receive it. "I was a teacher," Catherine said quickly, "in Philadelphia, before I came west. I can teach them reading, writing, mathematics, history. Real history, not just the government's version. And I will teach them Apache ways," Dakota added firmly. "Language, traditions, survival. They will know both worlds fully, belong to both worlds proudly." Whitmore looked ready to object, but Harris cut him off. "That seems more than fair, Colonel. Educated children, productive citizens, peaceful community. Isn't that the goal?" The colonel's jaw worked, clearly unhappy at being outmaneuvered. But with Harris and the other officers watching, and with Catherine's rifle still held with casual competence, he had little choice. "Fine," he spat, "but we'll be checking, regularly. And if I find any sign of hostility, any resistance—" "You won't," Catherine interrupted, "because we're not your enemy. We never were." After the soldiers left, Dakota pulled Catherine into his arms, his face buried in her hair. She felt him shaking, not with fear, but with rage at having to bow to That night, after the children were asleep, they lay together in the darkness, Catherine's head on Dakota's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "Tell me something," she said quietly. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me, choosing this life that's neither fully Apache nor fully white?" His hand stroked through her hair, gentle, considering. "I regret that you must face such hatred, that our children will grow up knowing they are judged before they are known. That I cannot give you the easy life you might have had. That's not what I asked." "I know." He tilted her face up to his eyes dark and fathomless in the moonlight, streaming through their window. "I regret nothing about choosing you, Catherine. You are the best choice I ever made. Our children, they are miracles. They will be strong because they must be. Wise because they will learn both worlds. Fierce because we will teach them to be. No, I do not regret." "Good," she whispered, "because I don't either, not for one moment." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and they made love with quiet intensity, celebrating what they had, in defiance of all those who said they shouldn't have it. Outside, The desert wind carried the scent of sage and promises. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, they had each other, their children safe and sleeping, their love unshaken. And that was everything. 3 years later, their small settlement had grown into something unexpected, a genuine community that drew others who didn't quite fit anywhere else. A Chinese couple who had fled railroad work camps, a freed black family seeking land and opportunity, an Irish widow with 3 children and no place left to turn, even a few white families who simply wanted peace away from the growing tensions of civilization. Catherine had become the unofficial schoolteacher, holding classes in a building the community had constructed together. She taught reading and writing and arithmetic in the mornings. In the afternoons, Dakota and the Apache elders taught traditional knowledge, tracking, plant medicine, storytelling, survival. The children, now including 8-year-old James, 5-year-old Nasha, and their newest addition, 2-year-old William, were growing up in a world their parents had to create because it didn't exist anywhere else. It was on a spring morning, with wildflowers blooming across the desert and hope feeling almost possible, that Catherine's past came riding back into her life. She was teaching the children their letters when the shadow fell across the schoolhouse door. Catherine looked up and felt time stop. Her father stood there, older now, thinner, his face carved with lines that grief had etched. Behind him stood a woman Catherine didn't recognize, younger, kind-faced, nervous. "Catherine," he said, her name rough in his mouth, like he'd been practicing how to say it for a long time. The children fell silent, sensing tension. James half rose from his seat, his young face already showing his father's protective instincts. Catherine held up a hand, stopping him. "Children, please continue your reading with the McGuffey readers. I'll be right outside." She walked past her father without looking at him, out into the bright sunshine where she could breathe. Dakota materialized at her side within seconds, having somehow sensed the disturbance. His hand found hers, steady and grounding. Her father took them in. Catherine, in her practical split skirt and simple blouse, her skin tanned, her hands work-roughened, her hair in a thick braid down her back. Dakota beside her, tall and proud, his presence a silent declaration of protection and partnership. The children, visible through the schoolhouse window, beautiful and bright and loved. "You look well," her father said finally, awkwardly. "Did you expect otherwise?" Catherine's voice was cool, controlled. "Did you think I'd be dead? Suffering? Is that what you came to see?" "No," he flinched. "Catherine, I came to apologize." The words hung in the air, like smoke. Dakota's hand tightened on hers, offering strength without interfering. This was her battle, to fight or not fight, her choice to make. "This is my wife, Margaret," her father continued, gesturing to the woman behind him. Your mother died 2 years after you left. The doctor said it was her heart, but I knew better. It was grief and guilt and my fault." "I know she died," Catherine said quietly. "I heard from a traveler passing through. I mourned her. I mourned her too. And in mourning her, I finally understood what I'd done to you." His voice cracked. "I sold my daughter, my child, to a man I knew was cruel, for money I didn't need, because I was too proud to admit my business was failing. Your mother never forgave me. She died hating me, and she was right to." Margaret stepped forward carefully, as if approaching a wild animal. I told him he had no right to ask for your forgiveness, that after what he did, you owed him nothing. But he needed to try, to tell you he was sorry, to see that you survived what he did. Catherine felt tears pressing against her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Why now? Why after all these years? Because I'm dying, her father said simply. The same thing that took your mother, my heart. The doctor gives me 6 months, maybe less, and I couldn't die without telling you that I know what I did was unforgivable, that you were right to run, that everything you built here, he gestured to the schoolhouse, the settlement, the life visible in every direction, is more than I ever gave you the chance to have. He looked at Dakota then, really looked at him. Sir, I don't know if you understand English. I understand perfectly, Dakota replied, his voice even but cold. You wish to know if I treat your daughter well? If I am worthy of her? You who sold her like cattle? Dakota, Catherine said softly, but he continued. She is my wife, my partner, the mother of my children. She teaches our community, heals our sick, faces down soldiers who would destroy us, and does it all with more courage than any warrior I've known. She is not mine, she belongs to herself, but I am honored that she chooses me every day. Her father's eyes filled with tears. Then she chose better than I ever did for her. He turned back to Catherine. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, that I see now what I couldn't see then, that you were always strong enough to choose your own path. I just wish I'd been wise enough to let you. Catherine stood silent, her mind warring with itself. Part of her wanted to rage, to make him hurt the way she'd hurt. Part of her wanted to forgive, to let go of the poison she'd carried for years. Part of her just wanted him to leave, so she could breathe again. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said finally, honestly. You took my choices away. You made me property. You broke my mother's heart and sent me running into a desert where I almost died. I know. But I also know that if you hadn't done those terrible things, I wouldn't have found Dakota. I wouldn't have these children. I wouldn't have this life. She squeezed Dakota's hand, drawing strength. So I don't thank you for what you did, but I thank God for what came from it. Her father nodded, accepting the distinction. You can stay, Catherine continued. Meet your grandchildren. See what I've built. But understand this. You are not their grandfather unless you prove yourself worthy of that title. You are not my father unless you can accept who I've become and who I've married. If you can do that, then maybe there's something here to salvage. And if he cannot? Dakota asked quietly. Catherine looked at her husband, her anchor, her home. Then he leaves, and we continue as we are. Because this, she gestured to everything around them, this is enough. More than enough. This is everything. Her father stayed. He met James, who regarded him with the solemn wariness of a child who had learned early that not all adults could be trusted. He met Nasha, who hid behind her mother's skirts but peeped out with curious eyes. He met William, who knew nothing of betrayal and reached chubby hands toward this new person with innocent trust. He watched Catherine teach, her patience with the children evident in every word and gesture. He watched Dakota work with quiet competence, building a fence, repairing a roof, teaching James to handle a knife safely. He watched them together, the easy way they moved around each other, the casual touches, the private smiles that spoke of deep intimacy and partnership. On his third evening there, sitting by the fire, while Catherine nursed William and Dakota repaired a saddle, her father finally spoke. I was wrong about everything, he said quietly. about what made a man worthy, about what made a life valuable, about what strength looked like. He looked at Dakota. I judged you before I knew you because of your blood, and I see now that you have more honor in your smallest finger than I had in my entire body. Dakota continued his work, but inclined his head slightly, acknowledgement, if not quite acceptance. And you, her father said to Catherine, you were always the strongest of us. Your mother knew it. I was just too blind to see it. You didn't need a husband to give you value. You needed freedom to become who you were meant to be. Yes, Catherine said simply, I did. Can you teach me their names? My grandchildren's names in Apache? Catherine looked at Dakota, who nodded slightly. It was a peace offering, she realized. A bridge between worlds. James is called Nashoba. When his father's people speak to him, it means wolf. Nasha, you know, it means owl. And William, we call Hanya, which means spirit warrior. Her father practiced the names carefully, stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds. James giggled, and for the first time since arriving, her father smiled. A real smile, reaching his eyes. Again, James said. Say my name again, grandfather. The word hung in the air. Grandfather. A title offered freely, a gift of forgiveness that children give so much more easily than adults. Her father's eyes filled with tears. Nashoba, he said carefully. Wolf. Strong and brave, like your father, like your mother. When her father left a week later, it was with a promise to return if he had time left. Catherine hugged him, tentatively at first, then stronger when he whispered, I'm proud of you, so proud. I don't deserve to be, but I am. After he rode away, Catherine stood with Dakota's arm around her waist, watching the dust settle. You gave him a gift, Dakota said quietly. Peace before death. That is great kindness. I gave myself a gift, Catherine corrected. Freedom from hate, from the weight of unforgiveness. She turned to face him. You taught me that. You taught me that strength isn't about revenge or holding on to pain. It's about choosing what you want to carry and what you want to put down. Wise woman, Dakota murmured, kissing her forehead. Beautiful, fierce, wise woman. How did I become so fortunate? You dropped your weapon, Catherine reminded him, smiling. When I smiled. And I would do it again, he replied. Every time, forever. The letter came on a cold November morning, 8 months later. Her father had died peacefully in his sleep, with Margaret beside him. He'd left his house to Catherine, the house she'd grown up in, the house she'd fled from. What will you do with it? Dakota asked, watching her read and reread the brief letter. Catherine looked around their home, the one they'd built with their own hands, filled with children's laughter and the smell of cooking meat and the sound of Apache lullabies mixed with Irish folk songs. She looked at the school where futures were being shaped, at the fields where multiple families now grew food together, at the community that had formed around the simple idea that love and hard work mattered more than blood or background. Sell it, she said decisively. Use the money to expand the school, to buy more land so other families like ours can settle here safely, to build something that will outlast us. You're certain that was your childhood home? No, Catherine corrected gently. That was a house where I was raised. This is home. This is where my heart lives. She took his hand. Home is wherever you are, Dakota, wherever our children are. This land, these people, this is what home means. He pulled her into his arms, this woman who had stumbled into his life dying of thirst and had become his reason for living. "I love you, Catherine Whitefeather. Every day I love you more. Even when I'm stubborn?" "Especially when you're stubborn," he grinned. "It's one of your best qualities." She laughed and kissed him, and in that moment, surrounded by the life they'd built against impossible odds, Catherine knew a truth deeper than bone. They had won. Not because they'd defeated every enemy or overcome every hardship, but because they'd chosen love over fear, hope over bitterness, together over alone. And they would keep choosing it, every single day, for the rest of their lives. The desert wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the scent of sage and secrets and second chances. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. In the schoolhouse, children's voices rose in song, words in English and Apache and Chinese and Irish, all blending into something new, something beautiful, something wholly their own. This was the Whitefeather settlement. This was their legacy. This was love made manifest in every building raised, every seed planted, every child taught, every meal shared. And it would endure, long after the stories of their beginning had faded into legend. The warrior who dropped his weapon when she smiled, the woman who chose freedom over safety, and the love that proved stronger than everything that tried to break it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Catherine and Dakota's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.